Okay, we can start. Welcome everybody to our press conference about consensus objectors and deserters from Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. This press meeting will be held in English. Pelkästään englanniksi puhujat toimii, mutta jos on kysymyksiä, niin voidaan sitten kääntää suomeksi. Tai siis englanniksi. And I am Esa Noresvuo. I'm Secretary of EBCO, European Bureau for Consensus Objection. And here is Alexia Choni, President of European Bureau for Consensus Objection. Derek Brett will represent EBCO's report about consensus objection to military service in Europe 2021 in a year, and Alexander Belik from the movement of consensus objectors from Russia will speak about the situation of consensus objectors, deserters, and opposition in Russia and also outside Russia. And via Zoom from Kiev we have Yuri Selichenko from the movement of pacifists in Ukraine, and he will tell us about the situation of consensus objectors in Ukraine. We have also present Sam Wiesemans, long-time EBCO member who is vice president of EBCO, and Semi Sapmas, who represents War Resisters International. Why we are in Finland is that AKL, the Union of Consensus Objectors, is affiliate organization of EBCO in Finland. And EBCO had its General Assembly this weekend in Helsinki in the Peace Station.
And just an introduction for EBCO, the European Bureau for Consensus Objection. It's an umbrella organization which was established in Brussels, in Belgium, in 1979. We actually bring together all the consensus objectors of the Council of Europe area, so not only European Union, Council of Europe, promoting the right to fundamental human right to consensus objection to military service before, during, after the war. And we have a role on the Council of Europe, we have a role in the European Parliament, and involvement in the annual report in the Committee of Civil Liberty, Justice and Home Affairs, which will be presented by Derek later. We are also a member of the European Youth Forum, and we have this website where you can find all the information, all the press releases, the annual reports, and the interactive map for the consensus objection in every country. This is how it looks like now, and it's you click on each country, you know, and then you open, and you have the page with the updated information, which we update every year, about the conscription, the consensus objection, if it's recognized or not, how long is the military service, how long is the civilian service, if it's existing. We have special care for the minors. We are, of course, against the conscription of minors, so we monitor this as well. And we give also statistics, and we are also, of course, defending consensus objectors if they are prosecuted, and if they are arrested, if they are in prison. So you can see some examples here. You can even download it as a PDF version, so you can see how it looks like and what information we provide every year. But let's now have the presentation, and we have a copy of the EBCO report here by Derek Brett.
Well, yes, as this is the latest edition of the EBCO report. As Alexia pointed out, there was a resolution in the European Parliament back in 1994 which asked the Committee on Civil Liberties to consult EBCO annually on the situation of conscientious objectors in Europe. Since 2008, EBCO itself has taken the initiative and has produced its annual report of the situation throughout Europe, as Alexia said, not just the European Union, but the entire Council of Europe area, including the small holes in it where places are not fully members at the moment. And of course it can be downloaded from the EBCO website. Of course, this year events have moved on dramatically since this edition was published in January, and all these changes will be reflected in the 2022 edition, which is currently under preparation and which we will be launching sometime in January at a date later to be announced. Alexia has more or less summarised the materials that are in the report, except that she did not mention the very important first section, which is an update of developments in the European and the international jurisprudence under which conscientious objection to military service has become firmly established as a human right. Now, what this means is that anything at all, amounting to punishment of someone for refusing on grounds of conscience to perform military service constitutes a violation of his or her rights, and thereby of the state's obligations which it has undertaken under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and in this region under the European Convention on Human Rights. These commitments, these international human rights commitments, also put at least a moral obligation on all states to give protection to all those who are obliged to leave their own country to avoid violation of their human rights. And of course, in this year of renewed war in Europe, special attention must fall upon those seeking to remain abroad because simply they refuse to fight. And I think that's probably an appropriate point to pass back to Alexia.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much. Here you can see some maps from the report itself and some tables, some statistics. We will not enter now in detail, but this is exactly every updated information every year. So we have also the EBCO recommendations to all the European states that we summarize every year. And of course, we encourage states to abolish compulsory military service and to refrain anyway from prosecuting or harassing conscientious objectors, to legally recognize fully the right to conscientious objection. If there is an alternative service, it should be real, non-discriminatory and non-punitive, and of course not to recruit any person, children, minor, this means less than 18 years old. The applications for asylum, exactly as Derek said, should be accepted from conscientious objectors when they seek refuge in other countries, like it's now the case for the Russian war against Ukraine. And we focus also in decreasing military expenditure and introducing peace education. So what we have been doing now, not alone, together with War Resistance International, with Connection IV and with the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, we have published an appeal for the protection and for the asylum for conscientious objectors and deserters from all the member states that are involved in the war in Ukraine. This has already happened in the past when we had the war in Yugoslavia. Again, there was some motion like that, and there was action taken on the level of the European Union and the Council of Europe. So we launched this on 9th of June. We had a joint press release entitled Broad Civil Society Alliance Calls for Protection and for Asylums for the Deserters and Conscientious Objectors from Russia, Belarus and Ukraine. What we ask here and what is already co-signed by more than 60 peace, human rights or refugee organizations from all over Europe from 20 different countries. It was already in the launch. Now there are even more. They're increasing every day. And we are preparing also the second phase of the launch of this campaign that it will be soon in September. So we call all the European governments to grant protection and asylum to all the objectors that they need immediate protection and permanent protection, not something temporarily, because we know all, and it has been proven that if they are back to their country, they really face persecution, torture, they are vulnerable to all kinds of human rights violations and of course imprisonment, and they even have death threats. It's a very serious issue. So we have this appeal, which has also a letter addressed to the European parliamentarians, and a draft resolution is included in this appeal, like it was the case of Yugoslavia in the past. So these are the main points. This fighting of Russia, the war, is an illegal operation. It's a war of aggression, so it's a clear illegal operation. So all the people fleeing for this, for reasons of conscience, for reasons of avoiding taking part in any side of the war, they are of course entitled to protection under the EU Qualification Directive, and they should be guaranteed protection and asylum. So this it should be recognized. It's fully recognized as a human right, as Derek said, by the European and international standards. So we want to make sure that this applies immediately with no further delay. And there is a reason of, there is a series of legal documentation and arguments why it should be this. It's according to the UN Charter, which prohibits the war of aggressions. It's a violation of international law. There is, for example, the Rome Statute. There is everything here you can find. I will not enter in details. You can find it online. And of course, the right to conscientious objection to military service and to participation in war is inherent in the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. So there is no exemption during wartime. So there is no excuse and no reason will be accepted if they say that the right is suspended during war. So this is the three demands that we have for the Council of Europe and the European Commission for all the member states. We want to ensure not only for the males but also for the females who are opposing the war, because we have activists, we have women, we have journalists that they are publicly condemning this war, that they are supporting the end and they are speaking against the armies. So we want everything to be correct and protected by the law and in practice, and all those who are evading the draft and are evading the country, and not only to have a protection but also in the countries that they will go, we want to ensure they will have possibilities for training, for education, for employment, and of course for housing. So this is the link of the appeal. You can find it here. And there is a continuously updating website where you can find the legal situation in all these three countries, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, and the information and the protection of asylum in these countries for the objectors and deserters. So these are the links. And now let's pass to Alexander Belik. I will share the presentation from our Russian member and lawyer and activist, and we are really happy we have him with you. So I will, you can sit here, yes, thank you.
So hello everyone, I'm Alexander Belik. I'm the coordinator in the movement of conscientious objectors and lawyer, human rights activist. Mediator, and today I will speak about the opposing war in Russia. So here is a statement of the movement of conscientious objectors which we published on 24th of February this year, and so first I will tell a little bit about the changes which happened in our in life of our organization since 24th of February. We are a human rights organization. We are working online in Russia. We are helping draftees not to go to the army. And since the beginning of war, in March, April, and in May, we faced the double of our appeals to us, the doubles of people who wanted our help. We managed to help all of them, and now the situation of the number of consultations got back to the numbers which we saw last year. So also we started to work with deserters this year, because before that we never worked with people who are already in the army. We worked with the draftees, with the people who are not going there, and since this year we are working also with the deserters who are already in the army. Also we became a part of the coalition of human rights organizations which are working today with the draftees, with the deserters, which with all of them. We making in this coalition we are consulting people through the Telegram bot, AGS Novar bot, which means Alternative Civil Service Novar bot, and yes, and there is also a Telegram channel for this coalition, which is a call for conscience, the name of Telegram channel. Also, we launched a petition against the draft. It got more than 30,000 of subscribers. Yes, and also we not forget about the queer draftees who faced the double discrimination in all of this situation. For example, trans people now, yes, facing a lot of troubles with not only because of their transgender status, but also with the things connected to their draft to the army. So first thing I wanted to say that Russians refuse to fight in Ukraine. We are facing a lot of cases of people who don't want to continue their work in the military, which means now all of the soldiers which are now today on the front line, which are in Ukraine from Russian side, they are all workers of the Ministry of Defense, so they are not draftees, they are working, and they don't a lot of them don't want to continue this work and want to broke the contract. And here you can see one of the articles about the Bryanka, where was the camp, concentrational camp for these people who are trying to avoid continuing war, was launched in the July, and since July it was it proceeded a month, so it worked a month, this camp, and after the media attention, after a lot of the appeals to procuracy, they stopped this camp, but more than 300 of people went through this camp through this month. Also, the people who are now making reports not to go, trying to not to continue their work in the Ministry of Defense, they are facing a psychological pressure, from the commanders. Their commanders don't want to accept these reports and saying that, oh no, you cannot broke the contract, you cannot go home. But if the person is insists enough, they are not continuing work and can go home without any prosecution. But they should go through all of this psychological pressure, and not only psychological pressure, as you may see in this case of Bryanka camp. Also, Russians are protesting in the country, inside the country. I mean, this is a number of cases, a number of detentions of people who are like made some anti-war actions since 24th of February. Also, there is now 224 criminal cases in Russia against people who made the anti-war position online or made it offline somewhere or made some actions. So this number is the number of detentions. Not all of these people now are still detained. Some of them are free, some of them are fined. But the number of criminal cases now is 224. Here is one of the examples of the actions. It's one of our volunteers and the meaning of the action, and this number is the number of the article of the criminal court which prohibits not saying anything about the army which is not mentioned by the Ministry of Defense. So you cannot say in Russia anything which is not mentioned in the reports of the Ministry of Defense, because it's like discreditation of the army, they say, or spreading the fakes. So there is two different articles, which one of them is spreading of the fakes and another is discreditation of the army. They are quite similar, and the main thing is you cannot say anything which is not mentioned by the Ministry of Defense in their press releases and the press conferences. Here is one of the here is one of the persons who is persecuted by the according to this article. Sasha Skachelenko, she was making a price tags in the supermarkets. She changed the original price tags to the price tags with some phrases and numbers about the war. So like the inflation will rise up to the number, or there is a number of kids which died in Ukraine and the number. So instead of original price tag, she put it these marks, and now she's in the custody, waiting to the decision of the court. Yes, and she can face up to 10 years imprisoned for this action. Now there is a petition against this persecution. It is only one, it is the most famous of the cases. As I told you, there is 224 cases like that in Russia. Also, Russians are trying to unite abroad. Here is our new anti-war flag. You may see. I originally came here after the Congress of the Free Russia, which took place in Vilnius last week. It is like a Congress of the opposition abroad, and there was a lot of people who are making now diasporas of Russians all over the world, and the main theme of these diasporas now is free. Main title is Free Russia, so it's like diasporas of new free Russia, and normally Russians didn't ever form the diasporas like Ukrainians or Belarusians or I don't know Azerbaijan people. We are like living just all over the world, but not forming any communities. And now there is a big demand of these communities, because a lot of people at once became foreigners and find themselves somewhere in New Zealand or or in Europe. Yes, and these diasporas are really almost everywhere now, and it's really if it will like continue work, it is really a huge thing, because we have never seen anything like that, like about Russians. So I saw it with the Belarus people, with Ukrainians, with a lot of other nations, but with Russians I've never seen anything like that. We've never formed anything like that, and now it's really, I think, huge step on which we can now see. Also, I will tell you a little bit about the movement of conscientious objectors and our work toward the free world without violence. It's one of the missions of the movement. You can find my presentation and find our site on stoparmy.org, the presentation in after/war. So we are trying to like explain to our draftees three main points. One of them is that the security point, that no, according to our practice, no one was drafted if the person don't want to go to the army in Russia. If the person insists that he don't want to perform military service, he is not drafted. And this is the main thing which we are trying to explain. But people are really afraid of the military commissariats, and military commissariats are really like make big psychological pressure. But if the person insists and saying no, I don't want to go to the army, and for example making reports for every unlawful act of the Ministry of Defense. In their cases, the Ministry of Defense understood that this person is troublemaker and don't want to continue any work with him, because the military commissariats got a lot of people and they don't want to proceed work with the person if this person know every law which is in this sphere. And in Russia it's quite it's I think impossible to draft a person according to the law, like apply every instruction of the Ministry of Defense, because there is a lot of instructions which they cannot apply. Yes, and that is a theme which a lot of conscientious objectors use. They just appeal for every unlawful act. After that, the military commissariat forget about them, and they forget about the military commissariat. It's the main practice, yes, which people are using. But also we have got the alternative civil service, of course. Only half of the people are got the replacement of military service for alternative civilian service. Anyone can apply for that. It's not only about the religious beliefs. Anyone can say that he don't want to go to the army and apply for alternative civil service. In half of the cases they've got their replacement. But we are using alternative civil service not as we are not promoting alternative civil service, because we in the movement think that it's also not the good practice, because it's more than it's 2 years. The military service is 1 year and alternative civil service is 2 years. We think it's punitive practice, and we don't advertise this practice for our draftees. We don't say that it's a good practice, but we use the application for alternative civil service to stop the process of the draft, because after you apply for alternative civil service, the draft process for you is stopped until the draft commission will make a decision on the are you going to alternative civil service or don't you go to alternative civil service, and it takes time. And after they denied you, and you can use the first step, which I told you, be a big troublemaker to make them deny you, because if you are a troublemaker, they don't want to give you the right to go to alternative civil service. Normally, if you're applying a lot to the prosecution and saying that military commissariat broke the law in here, and here, they don't replace your military service with alternative civilian one. And in the case of denial, you can apply to the court, and it's in the most of the cases it will stop the draft process for you in the particular draft period, and in the next draft period you will apply again for alternative civil service. They will again deny you, you will again go to the court, and after that the draft period for you also stopped, because the court cases normally pending 6 months or more, and the draft period is 6 months. So if you are applying for alternative civil service, they deny you, you go to the court, and the draft period just stop until the court decision will be made. And then the next draft period is a new situation, and then you applying for alternative civil service, and it's you can do it as much as you want. And the last thing, but not the least, is the objection on the medical visas. We are trying to explain how to do that and how to make the medical documents properly. Because if you are not doing that, they just denying you in any disease. But if you are doing all the things according to the law, make a lot of documents about your situation, they will let you go. That's it. And here you again on our site. Here are my contacts. You can find me anywhere in Telegram, in Facebook, in Instagram. Yes, thank you very much. And now we are
thank you, Alexander.
switching to the jury, I think.
Yes, there will be possibility to ask questions after Yuri will speak from Kiev. And we have problems with stream. It doesn't work at the moment, but we will publish the recording of this event immediately after the event to Aseista Kieltäytyjien Liitto's YouTube channel. It's streaming now. Okay.
Super.
Great.
Solved already.
Yes, but now we give floor to Yuri Selyachenko from the Ukrainian pacifist movement.
My dear friends, thank you for coming and interest to the situation with violations of human rights to conscientious objection to military service. My name is Yuri Selyachenko. I represent Ukrainian pacifist movement, and I will speak about the situation in Ukraine. Few words about our organization. We are basically a small group of people trying to be consistent pacifists in country at war. It is a hard mission, but the imperative of our conscience does not give us other choice. We believe that war is a crime against humanity, and therefore we should not support any kind of war, and we should strive for the removal of all causes of war. Ukrainian pacifist movement was founded in 2019 to advocate, practice, and protect human rights to peace and to conscientious objection to military service. We participate in international networks, European Bureau for Conscientious Objection, War Resisters International, World Beyond War, International Peace Bureau, Eastern European Network for Citizenship Education. Areas of our peace work includes three main directions. Firstly, it is uphold human right to refuse to kill. We claim legal right to conscientious objection to military service according to international human rights standards, helping to advocate and defend the right to refuse to kill. Secondly, our aim is to stop the war in Ukraine and all wars in the world. We call for immediate ceasefire, fair, inclusive peace talks, and worldwide transition towards non-violent society. And thirdly, we are building peace. We help civilians to survive and live peacefully and happily, remaining civilians. We tell the truth, give hope, help the needy, study and teach peaceful conflict resolution and non-violent way of life. We strengthen solidarity of peace-loving people and peace movement. We had 2 online meetings after Russian invasion, adopted statements condemning Russian aggression and calling for diplomatic solution. We celebrated the International Conscientious Objectors Day at 15th May. We discussed peculiarities of conscientious objection to military service in Ukraine under martial law and shared stories of life. Ruslan Kotsaba described how his faith and hope helped him to survive imprisonment for refusal to kill. He is still under retrial for his 2015 YouTube blog calling to boycott mobilization. Ruslan already spent in prison 524 days. He was acquitted, but this acquittal was quashed by higher court under pressure of right-wingers. After 2 violent attacks on him, his mother and lawyer a year ago, during which his eye was injured, the court decided to continue hearings online, but now at the retrial, a prosecutor seeks a court order to make him personally attend the hearings or arrest him again. This coincided with threatening messages. So let's hope that the next hearings in Ruslan's case, scheduled for 14 September, will not add any dangers to his life, health, and liberty. Our country legally recognized conscientious objection in 1991 by the law of Ukraine on alternative non-military service. Last year in Ukraine, more than 1,600 objectors conducted alternative service instead of military duty. Unfortunately, alternative service in Ukraine is punitive. Its length, for example, is 1.5 times longer than military service. It is so-called term-limited military service in peacetime. Under martial law, compulsory military service have no limits, unfortunately. And also alternative service is hardly accessible. Unfair procedures and extortion of bribes are usual things. And Ukraine refused to comply with the suggestions of the United Nations Human Rights Committee, which recommended to ensure non-discriminatory access to alternative service, to stop abductions and arbitrary detention of objectors. Only members of several particular religious organizations, less than 1.5% of the population, are allowed to claim conscientious objection. 10 times more of people are willing to serve in army, but our militarized culture, including education and media, is hostile to war resistors. So mostly people resist conscription passively. They seek exemptions or hide in country or abroad, or give bribes to evade conscription. Lots of officers take bribes for that, despite hundreds of them are arrested every year. Another problem is that Russia imposes conscription in Crimea and other occupied territories, contrary to international humanitarian law. And Russia-backed separatists in so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics also impose conscription without any respect to human right to conscientious objection to military service. They hunt for conscripts at the streets. Many young men are sitting at their homes to avoid mobilization. By the way, similar situation was in Ukrainian cities too, but under these separatists, without rule of law, it is even more hard burden on people. Despite Constitution of Ukraine guarantees a right to replace compulsory military service in case of its contradiction to religious beliefs, with alternative non-military service, and this norm was not suspended by presidential decree proclaiming martial law, in practice this constitutional right is not guaranteed. Ukrainian pacifist movement recently received an answer to our public information request from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and this letter says that replacement of military service by mobilization with alternative non-military service is not allowed. Such policy is based on a militarist interpretation of two laws, law on mobilization and on military service. It contradicts not only Constitution of Ukraine, but also international human rights standards. Despite the state can derogate from some human rights obligations during public emergency, such as the war, And Ukraine indeed derogated from Article 9 of European Convention of Human Rights. In the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 18, which according to General Comment 22 of the Human Rights Committee includes a right to conscientious objection, is a non-derogable right, as stipulates Article 4 of the ICCPR. So Ukraine should respect human right to conscientious objection to military service, even in time of war, according to its international obligations. Yet this right is violated, and responsible officials are unaware or pretend to be unaware. For example, thanks to the solidarity of several non-violent Italian activists, I had an opportunity to join them at the meeting with Vitaly Klitschko, mayor of Kiev. I spoke to you from Kiev, by the way. So I asked Mayor Klitschko when the city administration will allow conscientious objectors to access alternative non-military service, because it is responsibility of city administration according to law. Initially, Klitschko was unwilling to answer, but one of the journalists asked him to answer, and he said that if people don't want to bear arms, they could be allowed to care for the wounded. So he hints on alternative service. But he said he believes all men have a duty to fight in the army. But he promised that people will be allowed, for alternative service. This video with the answer was published on Facebook, and then I sent a public information request to the city administration, and I received an answer that military mobilization could not be replaced with alternative non-military service in Kiev. At least those who were accepted to alternative service before Russian invasion still are recognized objectors. But after the start of compulsory mobilization under martial law, if you declare conscientious objection to military service, you are treated as a evader from military service. And punishment, according to Article 336 of Criminal Code of Ukraine, is from 3 to 5 years of prison. Initially, courts are, I would say usually, courts are replacing prison with probation during 1 or more years. But people could be called to draft station again, and new refusal to bear arms could trigger a new sentence for real prison term. And we know situation not as I described here, but a little another situation with different crime. When people were already sentenced for real prison term for this so-called evasion. But it is still not confirmed that there were possibly objectors. Also, thousands of people are deserting or leaving military units without authorization. Many people are trying to escape mobilization going abroad, and there is significant increase in number of related criminal investigations. You see statistics at this slide, and if the media needed, this presentation could be provided to journalists. You probably heard about total travel ban for all men in age from 18 to 60 in Ukraine. Such a measure prohibiting males from leaving Ukraine violates human rights and international humanitarian law. United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine in recent report noted there are lack of legitimate reasons and legal grounds for such a travel ban. And it is not only prohibition to leave the country, it is also prohibition to leave the place of residence without permission of military authorities. Consider how dangerous it is if, for example, a man live in an area close to military combat. For example, one of members of Ukrainian pacifist movement, Oleg Safyanik, professional swimmer and conscientious objector, by the way, it is Soviet time conscientious objector. Several decades ago, he refused to serve in Soviet army. He tried to escape Soviet Union by swimming across the sea. And today he also refuses to go to Ukrainian army. He lives in the city of Marganets, on the bank of Dnipro River, opposite to Energodar. It is the city where the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is situated. So he hears all the horrible sounds of this combat. He asked permission to leave the place of residence as the law demands, but military authorities in this territorial recruiting center refused to give him such a permission, though they didn't insist on his mobilization, because in their words, he is not needed in the army for now. The army, in this way, keeps society mobilized and subordinated to war machine. Oleg calls it serfdom. He thinks it is like serfdom. Official terms for this serfdom and slavery are reserve and rear. The army needs so-called reserve of serfs for compulsory military service and in case of compulsory works, such as digging trenches. Oleg says that, for example, they tried to make Jehovah's Witness to dig trenches. Many people understand that militarist policies and arms race could prolong war in Ukraine for a long time, and they seek ways to leave the country. At this slide, you see a photo of our member Ilya Ovcharenko, published in German newspaper Zeit. When he was in Ukraine, Ilya was called to the security service of Ukraine and explained during his interrogation Leo Tolstoy's anti-war worldview. He is a great admirer of Leo Tolstoy, as perhaps we are all. He left Ukraine before Russian invasion. Now he lives and works in Hungary. But when he posted on TikTok a video advocating peace talks and conscientious objection to military service, the military people came to his home in Kryvyi Rih, to his mother, and threatened to bury him. 2 online petitions to President Zelensky asking him to allow men to travel abroad gathered tens of thousands of signatures. Zelensky answered to these petitions with rejection and contempt. The State Border Guard Service of Ukraine stopped at the border and handed out to recruitment centers more than 8,000 men, so-called evaders from military mobilizations. They were arrested during an attempt to cross the border. Since many people enrolled into Western universities, the Border Guard doesn't allow them to leave Ukraine contrary to the law. In October, military duty and expectantly travel limitations may be more actively extended on women of some professions, such as medics and engineers, or even on all women. There was a popular petition against mandatory military registration of women, again, tens of thousands of signatures. But our government still intends to tighten this policy, oppressing educated and professional women, sparing housewives for now, but they could be affected later. There was a scandalous story when a young female student, her name is Elvira, was expelled from Bila Tserkva Agrarian University for the first anti-war post in Instagram in her life. They wrote at the website of university, if she is against the war, she have enemy's view. It is quote, views of enemy. Just insanity. Ukrainian army is desperately hunting.
We should very soon go to the questions by the audience.
I am wrapping up, but I should mention very important parts about sentenced conscientious objectors. Because Ukrainian army is indeed desperately hunting for non-voluntary recruits. Orders to arrive at recruiting stations are handed out at streets, checkpoints, and other public spaces, including even churches. If you fail to appear, it could be considered as crime, and if you openly refuse to kill, it is considered as crime. For example, Kucher Andrei Volodymyrovich, internally displaced person from Zhytomyr Oblast, it is province, was found guilty and sentenced to imprisonment for 4 years with 3 years of probation in view of incarceration by Mukacheva City District Court of Zakarpattia Oblast. His sentence says that he avoided conscription for military service during mobilization in a special period due to the fact that he has pacifist views and does not want to take up arms. The same court sentenced 2 people for written refusal to bear arms and kill at the military recruiting center. Kapats Marian Vitalievich was sentenced and Korobko Alexander Olegovich was sentenced in August, both for 3 years of prison with replacement to year-long probation. Kucherov Dmitro Mykolaievich, a 32-year-old resident of the city of Alexandria in Kirovograd Oblast, was found guilty and sentenced to imprisonment for 3 years with 1 year of probation in lieu of incarceration, since according to the sentence of Alexandria City District Court of Kirovograd Oblast of 21 June this year, officially published in the Unified State Register of Court Decisions, he, quote, committed a criminal offense prescribed by Article 336 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, namely evasion of conscription during mobilization. And he explained to the court, and they wrote it in the sentence, that he is a Christian, a member of the Source of Life Church of God in Ukraine. Therefore, he refused to be drafted because he does not want to fight with weapons in his hand. They ignored his right to conscientious objection. They sentenced him to punishment. So people should not suffer because of their commitment to nonviolent way of life. Independent Ukraine should not continue centuries-old policies of repressions in Russian Empire and Soviet Union against peace-loving Ukrainians, such as Dukhobors, folk Protestants, followers of Leo Tolstoy, and other pacifists. Ukrainian media should not advertise militarism, and schools should have modern peace education for citizenship instead of archaic military patriotic upbringing aimed to make people obedient conscripts, not free and creative citizens, competent and responsible voters, able to think critically about the armed forces and elect representatives, able to ensure democratic civilian control. If Ukraine is going to join European family of democracies, human right to conscientious objection to military service must be protected. I am wrapping up. Ideally, inhumane practice of conscription should be abolished and prohibited by international law, and nonviolent methods of resistance to aggression should be prioritized and widely implemented. I believe also that if we will start to spend on diplomacy 10 times more than on army, not vice versa, that we are pitifully doing today, many wars could be avoided and many lives could be saved. Thank you for your attention, and I will gladly answer to your question when it is possible.
Thank you very much, Yuri. Yuri will stay online and Alexander will stay here. Time is now 10 o'clock, but we have the reservation until 10:30, so if you have time to stay a bit longer. 11:30, sorry. And the clock is now 11. So please, do you have questions for Alexander or to Yuri? Yes, and can you tell your name and before you?
Yes, I'm Kimmo Kiljunen, Member of Parliament here in Finland. And moreover, actually very interested also from Council of Europe side, because I'm actually the head of the Finnish delegation to Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly and also Vice President of the organization. So it's very important what I have heard today and not even to discuss later on what we can do. But first, few practical information in order to have the figures right. If I correctly understood that you mentioned, sorry, your name was? Alexander, Sasha. Okay. I understood also that you mentioned that there are some 20,000 anti-war activists who have been detained in Russia. These are important figures to get them roughly correctly. Around 250, close to 250 have been got in criminal cases. Are you also including among those 250 Yevgeny Roisman or Igor Ilyashin, this type of people,
Yes,
which are more political
yes,
prisoners
they
than
all
else, but they are also
in this,
included in
yes,
these
yes,
250. so that-
225.
True, okay, fine. But now it's
24.
question, how do you have any figures or estimates or guesstimates how many war deserters there are from Russia? First, how many of them have been somewhat jailed? Because you gave...
They are not jailed.
Okay, but do you have any figures?
I told you that in Bryanka there was like 300 of people.
Mm.
But it's only one camp, and it operates only 1 month.
Mm.
And we got the like application like people are coming to us since the beginning of war with like questions how to avoid and making reports since the beginning of war. So since March there are a lot like people who are applying to the Ministry of Defense with the reports to broke the contract. So but we cannot name the number, the count of all of these people, because it's like impossible, and they are not in prison, so not any of them was in prison because of that. They are just going back to their homes and continue their lives. So it's just they just go from the military, and that's it.
But when you were saying there that it should be also guaranteed that asylum should be given for deserters
Yeah.
and conscious objects from Russia, you don't have any guesstimates and about the quantities, potential quantities on that?
According to that in 1 month it was 300, so we can count 6 months of war, 300 6 months of war. So it's like estimation can be made on these figures, but it's not really like.
No, it's not official, but roughly,
but according to these
understanding.
figures, we can say that it's 1,800, but it's not
official, nothing. Yeah.
it's not real. We cannot like count the real number, but according to the numbers which we have the number of this month is in July with this concentrational camp. So according to this number. But even in July there was people who were not in Bryanka, who were not in this concentration camp, who could somehow get back to their homes, like not coming through this camp. So it's 300 in July is also not the all of the people who were refusing to continue fight. And I don't think it's not the big number, because they now are like Russian, Ministry of Defense and Russian like this частные военные компании Вагнера и вот все, что с этим связано. That's how to say частная военная компания.
Military, private military company.
Yeah, private military campaign. Yeah, like Wagner, they are fighting for people inside Russia to conscript them to the for example for these private campaigns, and it's the numbers which they are finding, for example, Russian custodies is also like 200 or 300, and they are really interested in this numbers. So if they're trying to find these 200 in Russian custodies for private military campaigns, I think it means that 300 which are like escaping from the war, it's also the big number for them, because it's not.
But can you little bit describe further what are the repercussions and maybe pressure for those people who have deserted, who have left the army and gone to back home? Do you have any information?
Yeah, they have got pressure only until they got home. So in the army they've got pressure. So when they trying to apply to the commanders with the report, they're saying that I don't want to continue work. The commanders say, so we will punish you according to the criminal court and sentence you in prison for all your life, for example. And they say a lot of words like that, and psychological pressure. But also they can like beat these people in some cases, but not. It's not a common practice.
But when they have returned back home,
No,
they
no,
can
no, no.
principally continue in their normal life.
Yes, but when they got home, they are not anyhow persecuted.
If there will be mobilization in Russia, would the situation change drastically on that regard?
We don't think it's really possible to now to launch the mobilization, because it's like Putin tries to say that nothing is happening to the people. It's not a war. It's a special operation. It's nothing special is happening. We are like continuing our normal life, and any things like mobilization can cause a lot of negative reaction from the people, and they're afraid really about this reaction. And we don't think it will be like real mobilization. They can launch, they continue this hidden mobilization which is now happening, so they can somehow make not a mobilization law, but like special operational draft, for example, something like that, with the special like rules. But every time there is a right to change subjection, and every time there is a right to object medical reasons. So we don't think that practice will change dramatically.
Okay. I still have lots of questions concerning European Bureau of Constitution Objectives, and particularly your relations with Council of Europe, because there might be certain issues we might even collaborate now, because I can easily make initiatives there if it's needed. But maybe others would like to ask, and we can discuss that later maybe.
Yes, that's good. So, somebody else has?
Elias Pyrkkänen, member of local youth group against war. Question for Alexander. Have you had any personal threats or similar from almost anywhere, mainly from Russian government or something?
I'm not only working in the movement of conscientious subjectors, I'm also the head of advocacy in the Human Rights Foundation sphere, which is the largest human rights organization, largest LGBTI organization in Russia, the largest LGBTI foundation, and all of the threats are coming through this sphere of my life. So normally these threats are not coming through the objection, the military, and all of that stuff, but from the things which I'm doing in the advocacy and in strategic cases litigation in the charitable foundation sphere, because it's a LGBT organization. For example, just before the war began, it was a large campaign in the Telegram of some right-wing Telegram with posting my photos and my Instagram and saying that you should come and write him. And there was a lot of people who were writing me some not really pleasant things in Instagram. Yes, it happens sometimes. But normally it's from this sphere of my life. I've never been harassed because of the work in the movement of conscientious subjectors yet.
But of course, yeah. I don't live in Russia now, and I live in Estonia because of all of this work. I cannot continue to live there. And perhaps to Estonia because of possible threats and possible draft. Because I, for example, still drafting, and I'm not escape from that. Yeah.
Any more questions to Alexander or to Yuri or to EBCO? Also, all of our speakers today are possible to talk with us after the event.
That would be interesting to listen more about the Congress of Free Russia. You mentioned in Vilnius you had a meeting. Of course, the flags look immense, but they were different cities actually.
Yeah.
The photographs.
Yeah,
so can you tell about more about that one? How loosely you organize, or how well you organize, etc.
It's not me. I have no connection to organize it.
Yeah.
To organize it, I'm just was invited there, like a representative of the grassroots initiatives. There was a panel discussion of grassroots anti-war initiatives there. But like to my mind, it's really good practice that people are trying to these old men's like from Russian opposition who are already for a long time abroad. They're trying to get in contact with the grassroots initiatives and with the people who are forming these we name them diasporal initiatives. Yes, with all of these people from different cities, and this is like the old man community is including trying to include all of the activists who are active now, and it's really like a good place to do and to work, and it's I think in process, and the next congress will be in November. Yes. Okay, so and previous one was in May.
Where the
I don't know.
How close the links are with Belarusian opposition?
No, it's not linked. This congress is not linked.
At all.
There are Belarusian Belarus activists on this congress, but it's not really like connection. It's a Kasparov, Khodorkovsky, one of these people.
Those are behind Kasparov and Khodorkovsky.
Yeah, they are like
they were there.
They were there.
Okay.
They are performing this. Kasparov, Khodorkovsky, Chichvarkin, Guriev, all of it. There is a committee of
anti-war,
anti-war committee, of course, and there is also a committee action, which is 12 like these people who are like for a long time were opposites to the Putin regime, and for a long time are abroad, and they're trying to do some anti-war actions now and to form a new free Russia.
That's your hope. Sorry to play.
But also it's not included the Navalny team, so it's like a separate one.
Navalny.
So not like they are not really close friends. It's in this.
Competition also.
Hopefully they can manage to to be together, and it's I think
most important they are fighting against each other. Sorry.
Great. Does somebody want to comment still?
I was just going to say, from what Alexander's been saying, those who have signed up for the Russian military, as long as Russia is trying to pretend nothing special is going on, are not being persecuted if they go through the process of asking for release. Those who are abroad who are liable for conscription are very likely to be conscripted if they return to Russia, but the provisions for conscientious objection are still in place in Russia, with the exception that, of course, the greatest number of conscientious objectors until recently were Jehovah's Witnesses, and Jehovah's Witnesses now being a prohibited organization, they are likely to draw attention to themselves under this ground if they apply as conscientious objectors. Ukraine, by contrast, has done something which, in my knowledge, has never happened before. It has suspended its conscientious objection provisions since the outbreak of hostilities, so that even conscientious objectors can be called up to military service. Now, as Yuri said, the right to conscientious objection cannot, the Article 18 of the International Covenant cannot be derogated from in time of mobilization. I didn't think Article 9 of the European Convention could either, but it sounds as though Ukraine has derogated from that. Even more than derogation, it has been firmly established that the right of conscientious objection is under Article 18(1) of the International Covenant. It is integral to the right of freedom of conscience, and therefore it cannot even be limited in order to protect national security, public order, or any of the other grounds on which, as a manifestation of freedom of thought or religion, it could be. So there is no way in which it is legitimate to remove this right, even in time of war, or especially in time of war, given the nature of the right.
Can I also ask Yuri one question? Yuri, can you hear? Concerning, thanks very much for your presentation on Ukraine. I must say you are very brave people. You try to keep your principles even in the wartime, and I understand how difficult it's for you to operate, because it's so easy you are labeled as a traitors in at home. I can understand it. There's so much militarization of atmosphere everywhere in Europe, not to speak about those countries which are involved in the war. Have there been any pressure, you personally or your organization, from the authorities' side? Can you operate freely, or do you feel that you can operate freely to keep your principles alive?
So I feel pressure. For example, when we are actively advocating peace talks and diplomatic solutions, stop of hostilities in time of Russian shelling. You know, I sitting here in Kiev. There are some sounds of distant combat in my windows, and I am talking on international fora, making posts in social networks about urgent need for peaceful solution. In that situation, people, a lot of people, mostly professional internet trolls, or voluntary internet trolls, are making hating comments. Some nonsensical comments indeed about you are traitors, and so how you can think about non-violence when we should kill the enemy. You should go to front instead of talking about peace. I always reply to that we need to talk instead of shooting. And here in the informational space, when peace is creating, it is my front. It is the place where I can contribute to preservation of sanity and in creation of hope for peace. Because when hope exists, there is possibility of better future. Hating comments, some phone calls, insulting, threatening. Some soldiers sent me via Telegram photos of killed enemies, and even some sort of insulting treatment of corpses. I will not describe details, but yes, there was, and probably there will be some pressure. But for now, there was luckily no direct physical attacks. Only this verbal, psychological, internet trolling and so on. Ruslan Kasaba, on the contrary, before Russian invasion, was several times attacked by right-wingers. And there are groups of right-wingers in Ukraine too. By the way, some Russian right-wingers went to Ukraine and became Ukrainian ultranationalists. They have closed groups in Telegram, and they are discussing how to find pacifists, what to do with pacifists. There is some sort of vague comments like promise of reward for some sort of lessons which pacifists should be taught in their view. So there is of course pressure. I faced also unexpected cessation of my contract in the university, but I can't say for sure it is for pacifist activities or not, and I am not intending to discuss it in details, but of course anti-war views in belligerent country is not not easy position, but our conscience tells us that we should seek peaceful way to resist the war, not the enemy. The enemy image always far from reality, because it is not only information about real misdoings of one or another side, but image of enemy is perception of other side as totally demonic, unable to behave like humans. And of course, this demonic image is always false. And of course, it inspires people for cruelty. And that's why we should say truth. That, for example, Russian aggression against Ukraine is contrary to international law. Of course, Ukraine, according to international law, have a right to self-defense. But there are ways of non-violent self-defense. And unfortunately, non-violent self-defense in diplomatic ways are not considered seriously. I wish that in future you more seriously commit to diplomacy and non-violent resistance to aggression. Because peace culture, culture of non-violence, it is future. I believe that in future we will not
Thank you. Okay, we will have to stop now. Thank you very much.
Last question.
Could I talk
Okay.
to you, Alexander?
Yes.
Yes. Alexander will not run away from Helsinki yet, and also Yuri can be contacted via that. You all have our information where to get interviews if wanted, but we must leave from this space soon so we can continue one by one if you want outside the room soon. But thank you all very much from EBCO and our dear visitors, and thanks for AKL for organizing this. And same for doing the